What do you want to talk about?
First, welcome to our channel. It's me, Alesha, again.
And Laura.
Yes. So Laura apparently had a question for me, a surprise question.
Yes.
And so we're gonna find out what that question is.
Well, I figure you're the best person to ask as far as to like explain it to me, because your major and thing you're going to be your doctorate is in anthropology. So okay, so I did the like 23andMe thing where you know I got my ancestry, and then it talks about your like Neanderthal or whatever.
Stop, pause. Neanderthal.
Okay, it's spelled TH.
Doesn't matter. It's Neanderthal. It doesn't matter. It's from a German word. It doesn't matter. Sometimes you see it with a T, sometimes you see it with a TH. It's Neanderthal. Trust me, this is something I get on to my students about. I always tell them I'm going to fail them if they say Neanderthal, but I don't. But it's Neanderthal. But you wouldn't know that, but I'm just letting you know. So you wanted to find out how much Neanderthal DNA you had?
Yes. And then like it showed me and all that stuff. And then I was also watching a video on my African American Studies, the class I'm taking, and it was talking about like genealogy and everything like that. And they talk about this thing where we went from like Neanderthal to like Homo erectus and Homo sapien, and they have all these different like lineages of like changes. It was a lot to take in at once, but it got me thinking about the 23andMe thing. How they want the 23andMe thing always says that they want your mitochondrial DNA to like see where you're from. So that led me into I'll get to the question here in a sec. That led me into like Googling, and I ran into this thing called what did I just say?
Mitochondrial Eve.
Yeah, mitochondrial Eve. And I was like, okay, but then I saw this this genealogy thing in my African American Studies showing that there's like no difference genetically, like for race and stuff like that. But as far as like where we come from, there were like two parts. There were like Africa, and then there was this other one up in like Europe, Asia area. And those are like, and they were saying like we all come from like these two groups. So because I did the 23andMe thing, and it was telling me how much, Neanderthal I have. And then I watched this other video which also talked about similar things. And then I saw the thing on Google about mitochondrial Eve. And now I'm like, is it one group that we could basically all be traced back to like one, person, or is it two groups? And it was like, when did it happen? If it's two, like, you know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. There's a lot of information and a lot to pick apart from what you said. Okay. So first, let me start with the Neanderthal stuff. So humans, Homo sapiens, we did not evolve from Neanderthals. We share a common ancestor with them in Homo heidelbergensis. So we're like sister species. So just like how humans did not evolve from chimps, but we are related to them via a common ancestor. So that's the same thing with Neanderthals. Some people aren't aware of that. They think we came from them. We did not. So we share a common ancestor with them in Homo heidelbergensis. So backing up even further, though, for the majority of human evolution since our split with chimpanzees approximately 6 million years ago, that entire lineage, there were like multiple species, some branching off, some dying out, some continuing to eventually now we have Homo sapiens. But the majority of that evolution occurred in Africa. It wasn't until more recently with Homo erectus, we have direct evidence that they then left Africa. Some populations of erectus stayed in Africa, some migrated into Asia, some migrated into Europe, modern day Europe. And so then, the evolution continued from there. But they were as far as we know, the evidence is pointing to they were the first to leave Africa. So like I said, the majority of evolution happened in Africa before that. Now, what was the other part of your mitochondria? So wait, so does that kind of answer your question about?
Yeah, answers my question as far as like the Africa, Europe, Asia thing.
It gets kind of complicated in looking at like our more recent, like the evolution of our lineage of hominins, because earlier stuff, it's all happening in Africa, and then later stuff, it's like it's happening in Africa and northern parts of Africa and southern parts of Europe and Asia. And then we still have debate in paleo about like, are we lumping certain species into one species? Like, for example, like Homo heidelbergensis and Homo rhodesiensis. Do we consider them two species?
I don't know what any of that is.
Okay, so, I'm going to explain.
No, specifically, like, I just want to ask, like, you're talking about species, so like the same thing where like chimpanzees and Neanderthal, they're just like a sister species when you're saying these different names? Or is that what they evolved from?
So,
you know what I mean?
It's not, okay, so like I feel like I need like my whiteboard to show you. So sometimes we have what's called anagenesis, where you have one species kind of slowly evolving into another species. That happens in nature. And then you have cladogenesis, where you have like a branching event. Like there's one population, and then due to like maybe migration or something, geography, something happens, diet, they then go on two evolutionary different trajectories. So they branch off. And so you have one ancestor, and then you have two branching off from that. Sometimes you have that, sometimes you have one kind of evolving into a new one, and sometimes those are all happening at the same time, depending on where you are on the lineage. That's like for any animal or plant.
Okay, that's what
so
continue.
So for Homo heidelbergensis, they are our ancestor, but Neanderthals, they are not our ancestor. We share an ancestor with them, so we're like a branching event.
Oh, okay, got it. That makes more sense. More sense.
But Homo erectus is in our direct lineage, like a long time ago. So like I said, it gets really complicated in terms of like some of the more recent stuff with understanding like how it happened, but basically is Homo sapiens evolved. Our species Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, and then we migrated out of Africa into parts of Europe, where we encountered Neanderthals who had been evolving there for a while. So we encounter them, and we are separate species, but because we're only separated evolutionarily, by, not that long, genetically, they could still reproduce. So I talk to my students about this a lot, something called the biological species concept. So when we talk about how do you define a species compared to like another species or another species, typically it's this idea that one species is separate from other species because it cannot reproduce with them. Is that Jordan?
No, that's a car.
So typically, like, they can't reproduce with another species. So like a cat can't reproduce with a dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, this is like everything in nature. Nothing's ever 100%. And so we know there are exceptions to this rule, like a lion and a tiger can reproduce. It typically only happens in captivity, but it can happen. Or a horse and a donkey can reproduce. Sometimes in these cases, the offspring are sterile, sometimes they're not. But anyway, so this is similar to humans and Neanderthals. We were definitely separate species, but we could still reproduce. And so that's how when you do 23andMe, you're like, oh, there's some amount of Neanderthal in there. For not everyone, but for many people, there's a very small percentage of stuff that's strictly Neanderthal DNA. Because obviously humans and Neanderthals share like 99% of our DNA is the same. Like for humans and chimps, it's like 98 and change. So same DNA. So it's very similar. But Neanderthals have some very specific things that are like unique to them that sometimes you can see in our genetic information. And in terms of mitochondrial Eve, I don't know as much about that. From what I understand, so mitochondrial DNA is DNA that you can only find like through the female lineage in terms of like the genes, and they can trace it back through that line. And as far as what I understand about mitochondrial Eve, like I'm not a geneticist, but essentially they can basically look at everyone who's alive now in their mitochondrial DNA and kind of trace it back to what often they'll kind of describe as like a single person. I don't know if it's that precise, but they can definitely trace it back to like I'm sure when you Googled it, it had like a time period. It was like, oh, this many 100,000 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And they can say, oh, this happened in, wherever it was, Africa, Asia, something like that. They can do a lot with genes. They can tell a lot of information. So while they can trace it back to that doesn't mean that necessarily, well, obviously we know we go further back than that. But then the question is, does that mean everyone who's alive now kind of stems from a very particular population? And I think that's the question. And I'm not sure if science has kind of answered that question yet. I will say that as far as what I understand about some of that is we had in Homo sapiens, we had, and before that too, we had a few what are called like bottleneck events. So due to many factors, probably environmental, ecological, there are times when the population kind of was constrained, or we had like a huge drop in population, and then we'd have bursts in population. Oh, can you hear Waffle in the background? Yeah. Snotty dog. Give her a second. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So I mean, I guess it could be that in one of those like events where the population was decreasing, and it was a smaller human population in a certain area, that we all could stem from that. Like I said, I'm genetics are not my expertise at all, and I think I probably have just a very surface level understanding of that particular question. But the other stuff, the Neanderthal stuff, I can talk about all day.
Okay.
So,
well, no,
that kind of answer
depends in the timeline and looking up things as far as
mm-hmm.
that. Just because, like, if you really just keep going back, it makes sense. We're all like just from the same person. Like we're like 100th cousins, everyone.
Right. I mean, at some point, yeah. I mean, maybe there was the earliest mammals, or something. The earliest primates, the earliest. I'm sure, and probably in like 50 years, we're gonna have all these answers. We're gonna know all of it. It's all gonna be really clear to us. Like,
it's just fascinating, like just learning. Like, I went to my interview, and I was like, "I'm Laura. I'm a mom, and I want to be a scientist." They were like, I was like, "No, and then I explained like what I want to do, and they were like, "Oh, okay." I was like,
"But you really said that?"
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Because they're like, let's let you start by telling us a little about yourself. I was like, well, I'm Laura. I'm a mom. I want to be a scientist.
They're like, you're hired.
We're like, really?
I was gonna say something.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, it was fine. Okay. So, I'm assuming our family at some point will watch these videos. Maybe not, I don't know. And but like it makes me think about like our family a little bit with some of these like really interesting like evolutionary questions that we are just like discussing freely, and of course like the majority of the scientific world understands and knows to be truth. But I wonder, like, has your mom done like 23andMe? And if she has ancestry, okay, because I think 23andMe and Nat Geo, I think those are the two that do the Neanderthal. I don't know if they all do it, but I wonder, like, when she gets something like that, if she's gonna be like, "That's the devil" or something. I don't know. Like,
but what that means.
She probably's like, "What's a Neanderthal?" Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your mom is very understanding. Well, she's a medical professional, so you'd think she'd understand evolution, the basics of evolutionary theory. I would think that would be part of the curriculum she had to learn as a medical professional. At least some of the basics, like disease processes in humans. There's a huge evolutionary factor in that.
I think it's important to say that the reason we're talking about this is because we were both grown up in like super Christian non-evolution family, where we don't talk about our views, but we're pretty sure based on how we were raised, we don't.
Well, I try to have conversations with my mom, about what I do for work
Yeah,
and
that's good.
when I'm studying. And I think she's like, okay, that's cool. And I'll talk to her about I'm like, yeah, Mom, 5 million years ago or 2 million years ago. She's like, okay. Like, I think she doesn't reject it, but I think she doesn't have I don't think she has an appreciation for like the beauty of science that I do or that you do, which is fine. Not everyone has to. But I think a lot of it is, and I think this may be the case with me and you, is it was never really, at least for me with my mom, it was never like a rejection of science. It was just that we didn't talk about it.
That's how
And
my mom, like, she was a nurse. So how is she going to talk to me about evolution?
yeah.
Like, I was allowed to like understand it. I was allowed to, but if I mentioned something like that around grandma, then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like, I knew we just didn't talk about it. We just didn't talk about evolution.
But I've said this multiple times. I'm not the first person to say this, but I've said this to you. Like, I told this to my mom, and I was like, why you have to get a flu shot every year? She's like, well, why? I'm like, because the virus evolved. Like, evolution's all around us. Like, we have new strains of things because these different diseases will adapt. Like any disease, every disease will adapt in some way or be subject to some other evolutionary force. So I don't know. I don't know how. I think that when I explain it to her in like really simple terms, like I do with my students, which is totally fine, she's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like she totally gets it. It's not like she doesn't understand it. I think in her mind, because we're talking about like genes and blah, blah, blah. And I think in her mind, all she hears is like evolution is that we come from monkeys. And she's like, that's weird. I don't know. And she's like, well, yeah, but like,
think about it. Sorry, I cut you off. Think about it though, like maybe like science has evolved in so many, like the last like 20 years, a lot, let alone 50, let alone 100. So like I think it's just like what they were raised to believe. And like once they stopped going to school or pursuing something like I mean, we like science. So, you know what I mean? Like if they were pursuing, like business, they're not going to be like what they believe or what they were taught would be like the last thing they were taught unless they learn something new or, an evolutionary change in society happens, where it has to be.
Like I've asked my mom too about like, Mom, do you really think that we evolved, like we are from Adam and Eve? Like, do you think that's that's real history, or do you think that's just a really great and interesting story as part of your spiritual journey? Like, and I think she's kind of gone back and forth, like, well, maybe it was true, I don't know. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But I think when it comes to that, when religious people hear evolution, it automatically makes them question like a lot of the stuff about the world's not 5,000 years old. We didn't come from two people named Adam and Eve. And that's another thing about the mitochondrial Eve, like they had to take on that name. And I think like for cultural reasons, like everyone's like, oh, cool name. It's like, okay, I mean, that's all. I mean, we could have a whole discussion about religion too, and our family, but yeah. Well, I remember when I got my tattoo, this one, it says a change in allele frequency in a population over time, which is the biological definition of evolution. Grandma asked me one time, what does that say? And I told her, and she's like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, it's the definition of evolution. And she was like, oh, well. And I was like, well, what's the problem? And she was like, well, I just don't believe that. And I was like, well, which part?
It's a bird.
And I was like, which part? Like genetics? I wasn't trying to be rude, but I was like, this is important. Like, which part do you have a problem with? That genetics exist, that we have something called DNA, that people reproduce, and then in another generation, the genetic information can be different. Like that's all it is, and then as we as scientists look and see those trends that happen, like it's nothing controversial, but in her mind, like, because they just, I don't know. I mean, I do know it's so many things. We could have a 3-hour conversation about it, about how they view it, how they view, I don't know. I think
it was like, I was going to say something. It had nothing to do with what we were talking about.
Change the topic. Like I said, we could have a 4-hour video about our family and religion. I mean, we should do a whole series on that. Like, we interview our family and God no.
No. Yeah. Okay. So, what'd you get in your imperfect foods?
Mm. I got the strawberry preserves. I got some vegan butter. I got 2 big stalks of broccoli. I got like 8 potatoes, a bunch of onions. I have on my list of things that I want every week are onions, bell peppers, and something else. So I got a bunch of onions and bell peppers. And I got some more shallots, and I know there must have been something else. Oh, lemons. Oh, the pears, lemons and pears. Yeah. And then, yeah, like last week I got that squash. Oh, and I was telling you I added it to the stew, and it was so good. It was so good in the stew. I made some more this weekend, and Steve was like, "This is so good." You know, I was telling you there's like 10 vegetables, and the squash gives it just a hint of like a sweet flavor. It's so good.
Nice. I left my drink inside. Damn it. Oh, Delali. Let's see. I went to the DMV.
Ooh, how was that?
That's interesting. First of all, they really promote making an appointment online, but how to make an appointment online? It's a mystery. But you can do this thing called get a place in line or something. Like you're like say which one you're gonna go to.
Oh, like a queue. We have this at school too. Like you can like be in line, but you don't actually have to be there. I love it because then it'll tell you like 30 minutes, and then so you can like head there. I love it.
Well, it wasn't working for like any location, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna go to the closest one to me. So I went, and I went in this line, and it was like not appointment line. I was like, oh yeah, that's me. and it was like one person deep, and this person. And oh my goodness. Okay, so this guy and this girl were right in front of me, and they were waiting because it's like, imagine just like the entryway of, like a Walmart or, DMV, but like the double-setted doors, So they have like station in there where like one side is where they like take your temperature, and like one side is like, why are you here? Like they don't even let you and like why. So I was like, I showed him my paper, like I did my application online for like I'm doing the real ID plus getting my name changed. And so I was like, and they're like, do you have your documents? Because we're not even gonna let you in if you don't have your documents. I was like, I did my application, here are all my documents, sir. And they're like, okay, here. And they hand me a paper, and they're like, come back at 1:30 and stand in the appointment line. And it was only an hour. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go get some food. I did some errands, and then I came back. And I stood in line at like 1:15. And I got there in and out of there at like 2:15. I was there like once I got in. But like it wasn't even like that long once I got in. It was like once I stood in that line, because they still make you wait outside until they call your number, and then when they call your number, you can go in. And then like if it's like slow inside, they'll be like, hey, if your number hasn't been called, like if you're 2 numbers next, come show me, and they'll let you in. So I got to like sit for like a few minutes, and then I did my thing. And I got my picture taken. I took my picture, and my hair was like up like this.
Ooh.
And they're like, take your mask down, off. And I was like, I took it off. And then they're like, stare at the blue dot. And don't move even after the flash. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I was like, this is me. I'm like, blue dot, blue dot, blue dot. And then she's like, okay, ready? And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, the whole time I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm like smiling like this. I'm like, But then I was like getting impatient, and it still hadn't flashed. So I was like, my hair was still up, but I can't hold my hand up there anymore. Anyway, so I was like, I changed it from this And then it flashed, and I'm like, oh God, I would have rather the no teeth than the teeth, and the face I felt like I was making, and she was like, oh, it looks good.
Girl, that does not sound very confident.
But she didn't like, she wasn't like her eyes are closed, or I'm just like,
well, that's probably,
she was like,
they can't be like taking everyone's best picture. They're just basically probably like, are your eyes open? That's it. Like, because on my driver, I look like an idiot, but you can tell it's me. So I'm like this. Like, they're like, your eyes are open. We can tell it's you. So if they waited for everyone to be like, oh, I approve this picture, they'd be there all day. Because most people would be like,
I don't want to see it because I don't want to know. But at the same time, I want you to be like a human being and be like, oh, girl, you look really bad. Like, maybe to chin up a little. Or
like, at least maybe take 2 for everyone. And then that way someone can be like, okay, out of these 2, at least this one's probably. Oh my gosh, I saw on Facebook a couple days ago. 2 weeks. Huh? That's not. I saw on Facebook the other day, I forget what state it was, but some woman got her license in the mail, and everyone, even she, like everyone had forgotten to say, take your mask down. So it's a driver's license picture with her, and she has a mask. Even people, when they printed it, like no one in the whole process was like, oh shit, we fucked up. So this woman was like, I gotta go back, because like,
she's like, no, it's me.
Can't tell. I know, she's like, it's me, I swear. Yeah, I was like, oh my God.
That's funny. Okay, we're coming up on like 30 minutes here, so I was gonna stop it and go inside.
Sounds good.
If you think of anything else, I'm gonna probably take a nap. But I can do one later too. Depends what time you're going to bed.
I'm gonna be up. I don't know if Steve's coming over tonight, probably. I have no idea. He, like, officially, like, his move-in date wasn't until, like, whatever, like the 16th or something. He's been here for the last 5 days, like, so yeah, I think the move-in is early. I don't know. Because, like, most of his clothing is here. Most of his toiletries are here. His, like, most of his, like, office stuff, his computer and stuff is here. So I don't know. So I don't know what's happening with that. But yeah, just let me know. So for this video, thank you everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe. We have so many great videos coming with us and our witty banter, and some with just Laura and some with just me. And we will see you guys on the next one.
Till next time. Bye.